Hi Pre-Calc, this is section 4.3 and this is right triangle trig. So unlike 4.1, which is rotational trig where you wrap around the circle, this section is like you're going to have a fixed triangle. There's a fixed triangle, and this specifically in terms of our triangle, these are all in this section going to be right triangles. And basically what a right triangle means is that one of your angles is going to be 90 degrees, okay? One of your angles is going to end up being 90 degrees. Okay, so we are going to start this section by finding the 6 trigonometric functions of theta. So let's go over the kind of things you have to do for that. So when you're trying to find ratios of sides, this is the definition of, so like the sine would be the opposite over the hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and so on. So what we mean by like opposite and adjacent is that that is all in reference to the angle. So the hypotenuse is always across from the 90 degrees, and the other two sides are generically called legs. The leg that is touching the angle is called the adjacent. The leg that is across from the angle is called the opposite. So if the angle is here, this is the adjacent side and this is the opposite. But if the angle is up here, then this side would be adjacent and this side would be opposite. So when we say opposite and adjacent, it's all in reference to where the angle is. So when you do the 6 trigonometric functions, it's just looking at different patterns between like the opposite and the hypotenuse, or the adjacent and the hypotenuse, and so on. So I'll come back to this in a minute. Let's first start with finding the third side of the triangle, because you're going to need all 3 sides to start to do these ratios. So to find the third side of a right triangle, you're going to use Pythagorean theorem. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A and b are both legs, where c has to be the hypotenuse. Now this is a popular triangle, so you might be able to do this in your head, but I'll still work it out just so you can see the general rule. I'm going to call this side the b, okay? So it's going to be a squared plus b squared equals the hypotenuse squared. So 9 plus b squared equals to 25. You're going to move the 9 over here, so you're going to subtract it. If you subtract 9 from 25, you're going to get 16. And then if you take the square root, you're going to get that b is 4. Since we're applying this concept to a triangle which only has positive magnitude, you're not going to get a positive and negative 4. You just always get the positive version. So this is a 4. Okay. So now that we have all the sides of the triangle, we can find the 6 trigonometric functions. So let me give you a little mnemonic for what I was just talking about in this table. So the mnemonic is SOHCAHTOA. So the sine would be the opposite over the hypotenuse. The ka is the cosine, which is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And the TOA is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So this is like, is that the, yeah, mnemonic. This is a really nice mnemonic to remember the sine, the cosine, and the tangent, okay? So let's start with that. Let's find the sine, the cosine, and the tangent. So again, the sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So for this triangle, because theta is here, this side is opposite of it or across. And this side is touching, which is the adjacent. So for this particular triangle, this is the adjacent, this is the opposite, and this is the hypotenuse. So all we're going to do is we're going to just fill in the definitions for these 6 trigonometric functions. All right, let's give it a go. So sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So it's going to be 4 over 5. The cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So that's going to be 3 over 5. The tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. The tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. So that's going to be 4 over 3. Now, for me, these are what we would call the reciprocals, or the opposite. So the reciprocal of sine, or the flip of this, would be the hypotenuse over the opposite. So if you notice here in that these formulas, let me see if I can get a little light better on them. If you notice, this is just these flipped, right? They're flipped. So if you can sort of remember that pattern, that might help you. So the reciprocal of the cosine is the secant, which is going to be the hypotenuse over the adjacent, and the reciprocal of the tangent is the cotangent, which is going to end up being the adjacent over the opposite. Okay, so these are the 6 trigonometric functions of theta, and when I ask you this on the test, that is what I'm referencing, the SOHCAHTOA, and then just remember the reciprocals as well. Okay gang, I'm going to leave this video here. I'll catch you in another video. Bye-bye.